Hey there, future diplomats and policymakers, especially to all of you tackling international relations for the UPSC. We're diving into some pretty influential political theory today.
Yeah.
Robert Filmer
Uh-huh.
versus John Locke.
Their ideas might seem like ancient history, but trust me, they're really foundational to how we understand global politics even now.
Yeah, think of this deep dive as a cheat sheet for kind of decoding international relations.
Yeah,
And maybe scoring some extra points on your UPSC exam.
for sure.
We're talking about the very basis of authority, individual rights, and the role of government. Heady stuff, but we've distilled it down to what you really need to know.
Right. First up, Robert Filmer
Okay.
and his patriarchal theory.
All right, lay it on me.
Imagine the world as one big family, with the king as the all-powerful father. Authority flows directly from God to Adam and down through the line of kings. That was Filmer's argument.
This is a pretty bold stance, especially in a time when the idea of a divinely appointed monarch was being seriously challenged.
Exactly. Filmer was pushing back against the growing popularity of contractualism, the idea that government should be based on the consent of the governed.
He thought that was a recipe for disaster.
Absolutely. Filmer believed that if people could pick and choose which laws to obey, society would descend into chaos.
Right.
He also couldn't reconcile the concept of individual rights with his view that everything originally belonged to God, and therefore the king.
Okay. So to Filmer, any limitation on the monarch's power was a slippery slope towards anarchy.
Yeah.
He even criticized thinkers like Grotius and Selden, who tried to find a middle ground between divine right and individual liberties.
Now enter John Locke.
Yeah.
Champion of individual rights and limited government, often seen as the anti-Filmer.
His two treatises of government were a direct response to Filmer's theories. He systematically dismantled Filmer's arguments piece by piece.
One of Locke's main points was that God never granted Adam absolute power over everything and everyone. And even if he had, there's no guarantee that this power would automatically pass down to all of Adam's descendants throughout history.
It's a good luck even figuring out who those descendants are after thousands of years.
Precisely. Locke also pointed out that there are no clear rules for succession. How do you even determine who the rightful heir would be after all this time?
So Locke wasn't just debunking Filmer. He was building his own compelling theory of government.
Right.
Based on freedom, individual rights, and the consent of the governed.
And this is where things get really interesting, especially for you IR enthusiasts out there.
Locke's theory of natural rights, life, liberty, and property existing before any government is central to understanding international relations.
That's right. Think about documents like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The idea that certain rights are inherent to all human beings.
Right.
Regardless of nationality or government, that's pure Locke.
So we see this shift from rights granted by kings or the church to rights that are inherent and universal. It's a cornerstone of international law and the human rights movement.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now this brings us to Locke's state of nature.
Right.
Contrary to what some might think, it's not a lawless free-for-all.
Right.
He believed it was governed by reason and natural law.
Okay.
People are free and equal, but there are some inherent challenges.
Yeah, like who protects your rights if someone tries to violate them?
Precisely.
But-
That's where the social contract comes in.
Right.
Individuals agree to form a government to address these challenges, giving up some freedom in exchange for security and a system of justice.
It's a trade-off. Individual liberty for the collective good. But unlike Hobbes, who advocated for a strong sovereign, Locke believed in a limited government.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For Locke, the government derives its power from the consent of the governed, and the people have the right to change or abolish it if it fails to uphold its end of the bargain.
Okay, so limited government. What are the core principles there?
Well, for Locke, government exists to serve the people, not the other way around.
Right.
It must operate within the framework of a constitution and the rule of law. And crucially, its power is limited by natural rights and the consent of the governed.
To prevent tyranny, he also proposed the separation of powers, right?
You got it.
Okay.
Dividing governmental authority into legislative, executive, and what he called federative branches, this idea, further developed by Montesquieu, is rooted in Locke's concept of limited government.
So we've gone deep on Filmer and Locke, but you might be thinking, why should I, a busy UPSC aspirant, care about these guys? Well, their ideas are alive and kicking in international relations.
Think about it. The tension between state sovereignty and international law. The debates about humanitarian intervention.
Okay.
The very concept of human rights as a universal standard. These all stem from the questions raised by Filmer and Locke.
Their contrasting views on authority, government, and individual rights are playing out on the world stage. Understanding their arguments gives you a framework for analyzing contemporary IR issues.
Imagine you're in the exam hall, faced with a question about the philosophical underpinnings of human rights interventions.
Right.
If you can trace the arguments back to Locke's natural rights and the right to revolution boom, you've got a winning answer.
Okay, so we've got Filmer, absolute monarchy, patriarchal power, Locke, natural rights, social contract, limited government. And these ideas are still shaping debates about everything from state sovereignty to humanitarian interventions. But let's dive even deeper into Locke's political theory, because there's a lot there that's relevant to international relations.
Okay.
We've touched on natural rights, but let's break that down a bit more.
Yeah.
What exactly did Locke mean by natural rights, and why were they so revolutionary?
For Locke, natural rights, life, liberty, and property weren't granted by any king or government.
Right.
They existed before any political structure, inherent to all individuals simply because they are human.
Right.
This was radical for his time.
It's like saying, we are born with these rights. They're not gifts. They can't be taken away, and they limit what any government can legitimately do.
Precisely. And this concept of natural rights as pre-political and universal is a cornerstone of modern human rights law. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted in 1948.
Okay.
Think about the timing.
Right.
Just after the horrors of World War II,
Right.
is essentially an articulation of Lockean natural rights on a global scale.
That historical context is crucial, right? The world had witnessed the devastating consequences of unchecked power and the violation of basic human dignity. It's like Locke's ideas, which had been percolating for centuries, suddenly became even more urgent and relevant.
Absolutely. The 20th century, with its world wars and totalitarian regimes, really drove home the importance of enshrining and protecting individual rights. And while there's still work to do in terms of fully realizing those rights for everyone, everywhere, the very fact that we have a global framework based on universal human rights is a testament to Locke's ideas.
And this is where it gets really interesting for IR. The concept of universal human rights challenges traditional state sovereignty.
Right.
If a state violates its citizens' rights, does the international community have a responsibility to intervene?
That's the million-dollar question. There's
Yeah.
no easy answer.
Yeah.
But the fact that we're having this debate, that humanitarian intervention is even on the table, reflects how profoundly Locke's ideas have shaped our thinking about international relations.
So natural rights set the stage for Locke's theory of government, but he also talked about a state of nature. What was that all about? Was he imagining a world without any rules or government?
Not exactly. For Locke, the state of nature wasn't lawless chaos. He believed it was governed by reason and natural law, meaning people have an inherent sense of right and wrong, fairness and justice, even without formal government. In this state, everyone is free and equal, but free.
But there are drawbacks, like what?
Well, it's tough to protect your rights in a state of nature.
Uh-huh.
What if someone tries to violate your right to life, liberty, or property? Who do you turn to for justice?
It's like the Wild West. You're on your own.
Exactly. And that's where the social contract comes in. Locke argued that individuals, seeing these limitations, voluntarily agreed to form a government.
So they give up some freedom in exchange for protection and security.
Precisely. And this is a key point for UPSC aspirants. Locke's social contract isn't just a theory. It underpins the legitimacy of modern governments.
So it's not just history and philosophy. It's about understanding the foundations of political authority and how governments earn their right to rule. This is essential stuff for analyzing international relations, engaging in policymaking, or even just being an informed citizen.
Absolutely. And this is where Locke gets practical. He wasn't just about abstract principles. He was interested in creating a government that would actually protect individual rights and promote the common good.
How did he propose to do that? What were his big ideas?
Well, we've touched on limited government.
Yeah.
For Locke, this was essential. He believed that a government's power should be clearly defined and constrained by a constitution and the inherent rights of the people.
So no absolute monarchs, no dictators, no unchecked power.
Exactly.
Okay.
The government exists to serve the people, not the other way around.
Right.
And if it fails to uphold its end of the social contract, if it becomes tyrannical or violates its citizens' rights,
Okay.
the people have a right to change or abolish it.
That's pretty revolutionary, especially for the 17th century. He was basically arguing for the right to revolution.
He was, and this idea, while controversial in its time, has had a profound impact on political thought and action throughout history.
Yeah.
Think of the American Revolution, the French Revolution, and even today's movements for democracy and human rights.
They're all rooted in the idea that political authority ultimately comes from the consent of the governed,
Yeah.
and that people have a right to resist tyranny.
Exactly. That's why understanding Locke is so crucial for UPSC aspirants. His ideas aren't just historical artifacts, they're living, breathing concepts that continue to shape our world.
So we've got limited government, rooted in the social contract. What else did Locke propose to prevent the abuse of power?
He was a strong advocate for the separation of powers.
Ah, yes. The classic checks and balances system.
Precisely. Locke argued that governmental power should be divided among different branches.
Right.
Legislative, executive, and what he called federative,
Okay.
to prevent any one person or group from accumulating too much power.
This idea, though further developed by Montesquieu, is at the heart of modern democratic systems.
Right.
We see it in the United States, in India, in democracies around the world.
It's a fundamental principle of constitutional government. Power should be distributed, checked, and balanced to safeguard individual liberty and prevent tyranny. And it all goes back to Locke's concern with limiting the power of the state and protecting the rights of the individual.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've explored the contrasting ideas of Filmer and Locke, delved into the core principles of Locke's political theory, and connected these ideas to contemporary issues in international relations. But what does this all mean for you, our dedicated UPSC aspirant?
Well, I think the key takeaway is this. Political theory, it isn't just some abstract academic exercise.
Right.
It's really a powerful tool to understand the world around us, for analyzing complex events and for crafting effective policies.
Yeah, when it comes to the UPSC exam, knowing your Filmer from your Locke, well, it can make all the difference. You'll be able to approach those political theory questions with confidence and nuance, demonstrating a deep understanding of the ideas that have shaped and continue to shape global politics. So you've got Filmer and Locke's arguments down. You can see how their ideas echo through history, right into the heart of contemporary international relations. But here's the real challenge for you as a UPSC aspirant.
Yeah.
How do you apply these ideas?
Okay, so let's say you're faced with a modern political dilemma, like a humanitarian crisis in a sovereign nation.
Right.
Does the international community have a responsibility to intervene? On one hand, you've got the principle of state sovereignty, something Filmer would likely champion. On the other, you have the Lockean argument for natural rights, which could support intervention to protect those rights. It's tricky, right?
Yeah, it's tricky.
Exactly, and that's what makes it so fascinating. There's no easy answer, no formula to plug in. You have to weigh the arguments, consider the context, and grapple with the potential consequences of action or inaction. This is where your deep dive into political theory becomes like a superpower for your UPSC prep.
Yeah.
You can see the different threads, trace the arguments back to their roots, and understand the complexities in a way that most people can't.
It's true. Think about the ongoing debates about global governance, the rise of populism, the challenges to liberal democracy. These are all playing out on a stage set by thinkers like Filmer and Locke.
Exactly.
So as you continue your UPSC journey, remember that political theory, well, it isn't just about memorizing names and dates. It's about developing a framework for critical thinking, for engaging with the big questions, and for formulating your own informed perspective on the world, the kind of perspective that will help you ace those IR questions.
And who knows, maybe someday you'll be in those halls of power, grappling with these very dilemmas, shaping policy, negotiating treaties, or advocating for human rights on the global stage.
And when you do, you'll be armed with the wisdom of the ages, ready to navigate the complexities of international relations with a deep understanding of the ideas that shape our world. If you found this deep dive helpful, hit that subscribe button and give us a like so we can keep bringing you more insights to fuel your UPSC journey. Keep diving deep, keep questioning, keep exploring, and best of luck on your path to becoming a future leader.